The topic I want to speak about today is technology and data and its impact on the patient and on the practice. I'm Mike Fillmore. And I'm the partner marketing manager for Dentrix. And this is Curtis Anderson. He's the CEO of Sherlock Intelligence, one of our Dentrix partners. So Curtis, I wanted to make sure we had at least a few minutes to talk about technology and data. Now I know you guys are big data analysis, if that sounds accurate.
Sure, yeah.
And the audience has probably heard me talk about this before, but Dentrix is big on understanding the impact of technology on the rest of your practice, and we do that in layers, right? We have your, and you've heard me talk about this before,
Sure.
We have patients at the pinnacle of your practice, we have your staff and your dentist that come next, and we have your business and clinical processes that come next, and your technology that sits at the foundation.
At the bottom.
Right. And every level is affected by the layer underneath it.
Yep.
So obviously with technology at the foundation of your practice, it affects everything, including the patient experience. I wondered if you found that to be true when you are visiting with practices when they consider big data.
Yeah, this is a great question, Mike. I think for us, technology exists in a dental practice to help enable the doctor and the staff to do their jobs better. Ultimately, it becomes an aid, and I think that's part of why it's at the foundation. Inherent in management is the idea of measurement. When you've got all these other processes stacked on top of that technology, being able to readily know where you are and where you're headed are really two key components, and to know and separate the difference between that ultimately becomes a process of measuring the progress towards a common goal. And I think for the practice side of it, there's a very delicate balance between patient care and then generally business management in every practice.
Right.
It's something that each of the staff members has to teeter-totter with, but at the base of the data that they're creating, there's definitely a story to be told about how the practice is being managed, about how the patient is being cared for, and you can start to really visualize where the gaps are for your staff, where the gaps are for the patient, where the gaps are in the processes, and then measurably increase and improve the performance or the level of care, depending on how that data, on the story that data is telling.
And that sounds, complicated, right?
Sure.
If I'm going to use terms that, if I'm talking to a dentist, and a dentist really, they didn't go to business school, very smart people, but they want to practice dentistry.
Yeah.
Now, how do you turn something like big data and broken processes, right, into something that a dentist can use? How do you parse data to mean something, to be actionable for a dentist to say, okay, this is where my practice is lacking, this is things we could do better?
Yeah.
In what way do you need to analyze big data, especially from a technology perspective, and then how people interpret that to make that useful for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that very, very carefully is the short answer. As we look at how a doctor or how an office manager may use that information, I think it's probably helpful contextually to share a few illustrations. Take the marketing of a practice, for example. What the dentist knows is who comes through the door. But given that technology base, they now have an opportunity to analyze and see who comes to their website long before they come through the door and fill out a new patient form. And so if we take that information from the website about who's coming, and we compare that or contrast it with what's in the Dentrix core, with the information that's there, you can start to see the disparity between who you're speaking to in your marketing and who's actually coming through providing production value to the practice. the complicated piece is making those, making those measurements and then providing the correlation visually. But that's all part of what our platform does is helps to really clearly paint the picture of here's who's coming through the door and here's who you're speaking to otherwise. Then it's just a process of speaking with the staff, maybe tweaking a few of the methods or the processes that you're going through to do the advertising to facilitate a very clear correlation between who's coming through the door and who you're speaking to.
Okay, and in that context, when you're asking people to interpret data, how much training do you feel is involved in I mean, how much does the software do for you versus what kind of training or how specialized does that training have to be for dental staff to make those kind of interpretations that'll help their practice?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, ultimately asking the right question or making sure that we're understanding the right question from the practices is really key to the central core of Sherlock. And so the training level needed, ultimately that's why we visualize it. I mean, visual information is consumed at 600 times the rate of speed as written information. And so by putting it into charts, what we can really clearly do is paint, this is the percentage of females, this is the percentage of males. And so the idea is that our platform provides the information visually in a rich enough fashion that there's next to no training needed. That really it becomes a point of conversation for the staff.
For a morning huddle or something like that.
Absolutely,
right?
A team meeting of some sort, for sure.
And I think that's really what we talk about in the goal that technology has, and vendors like us have, right?
Sure.
Is to make the integrations deep enough and to make the presentation easy enough that this can be worked into everyday language without a lot of specialized, focused training for staff that's already overloaded with training on a lot of other software.
No, absolutely. I have yet to encounter a dental practice of any size that had too many people working within the walls. I think that there is to that idea of education, there is a small measure of conversation that needs to be had with the staff and a little bit of a pattern that has to be established. Like any good process, it has to be put in place. And so using the information to start those conversations ultimately doesn't drive results on day number one of having it, right? But over the course of even a short period of time, knowing where we're aiming at and knowing where we are today, that conversation becomes increasingly important. By having the data and having it visualized, it enables the ease of that conversation and then the continued ability to come back to those same metrics, to those same bullet points, and say, how are we doing on this today? How are we functioning here? Are we actually improving? And is the rate of improvement increasing?
Okay, absolutely. I feel like that for the most part, dentists want a business partner, right? Or business partners that can help them run that practice so that they can practice dentistry. At the same time, we see a lot of staff members telling us, I already have too many things to learn. I already have too many things to do. I got my fingers in a lot of pies just to keep, this practice profitable and running the way that it is. If that's the case, it sounds like we're really talking about good data doesn't automatically equate to a good or a profitable practice, right? It's what you do with the data long term. You can probably talk about it better than I can.
No, I think you've really clearly outlined this. I might use myself as an example. I have a phone and I have too many apps. Right? I mean, you have too many apps. This is a general problem. And I think in that way, oftentimes technology has a tendency today to get in the way as much as it helps. And so ultimately, I think it comes down to really that level and degree of team communication, of identifying what is important. specialties. So a pediatric dentist versus an orthodontist. I mean, they're all of these things. All of this context plays into how each team should operate, and really the value of leadership to identify and help pinpoint this is what's important, then helps really clarify, for me at least, helps clarify what tools we should be using, because these are the most important pieces that we want to achieve. Ultimately, yeah, most of that data that's coming into Dentrix is really, really rich data. So,
Right.
so almost every one of your customers today has a rich repository of what we would call good information, good data. But as we go to utilize that, absolutely it can get overwhelming. Perhaps a referral source is better than your website, and as far as to use that same illustration of marketing.
Sure.
And so focusing on those referral sources and how the brownies that we're sending out, or the whatever that is,
Right.
that process becomes much more important than harboring information from the website, where a different practice it may operate completely different. At the end of the day, there are some fairly basic key components. I mean, production and collections, and I shouldn't say every dental practice, but most dental practices are going to be interacting with insurance companies and these types of things where there's commonality, and that's what helps create the general premise of all of this good data. But ultimately, I think defining what's important as a team, and then using the data to help warrant the discussion about how we're going to improve and chase those things is ultimately those goals is.
Your business processes should support your business goals.
That's absolutely.
Good data points help you choose good business goals. Right?
That's it. That's it.
All right. Eric, thank you so much for your time.
No, absolutely.
Appreciate you being
Thank
here
you,
and
Mike.
discussing with us.
You bet.
Thanks for watching, everybody.